before I forget. All right, I'll go ahead and share my screen. Okay. So thanks everybody for taking time out of what I know was a very busy day to learn a little bit more about the travel tracker and how your district is going to be using the travel tracker to hopefully make your whole trip process much more efficient and highly visible for everyone in the district. So what we're going to do today is talk about your role in it as the bus barn supervisors and how you guys are going to be able to receive trips that are approved and assign your drivers and your vehicles to trips. So that will be our focus today. Before we jump into the actual training part, though, I do need to show you that I'm going to need you all to register to use the system if you haven't already. Now, Jeff has the link for your travel tracker, and he or Kim will be able to distribute that out to you guys. But what you will do is click on the link, and then you'll come to this, you'll land on this page here. That's the login page. But the first time that you use it, you do have to register your email address. And so you'll do that. And if you'll come over to the green button here that says new registration, and you'll just click on the new registration button and put in your school email address and click continue. And then it will prompt you to create a password and to put your name in and submit it. Then what happens after that is the system is going to generate an activation email back to your school email address. So you'll go back to your school email and look for it. Hopefully it'll come right into your inbox. If it doesn't, you need to go find it. If you don't see it within 30 minutes, go look for it in spam or clutter or trash or whatever. The email comes from DAdmin, D-A-D-M-I-N, DAdmin, and it has in the subject line action required. So find the email, open it, and then just follow the prompts to complete the registration process. It's very easy.
Okay, I think I'm in there. This thing is being recorded, it says.
Okay, we can hear you talking.
Okay.
Don't talk.
All right.
That's how you mute it.
Okay.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Don't talk.
Okay.
Now, after you activate your registration, then when you come back to the travel tracker, you'll be able to log in with your school email address and that password that you created, and you'll just click the sign in. If you have trouble with the registration or if you have trouble with the logging in, there is a need help link on the page, so you can always contact our support desk, and they will be able to help you out with your login and registration. So I'm going to go ahead and sign in, and I am going to impersonate someone here. Okay. We do have, yeah, that's great. Thanks for muting. Once you get registered and get logged in, this will be the screen that you'll see after you log in. This is your page, your transportation administrators, and you guys will be able to manage trips that are submitted into the system. So kind of what's happening is that your teachers, coaches, folks at the schools will submit electronic trip request into the travel tracker. Once they submit it, Kim is going to review those requests. She can possibly make changes to them and figure out everything, make sure it's all good. Once she has determined that that request is what it needs to be, she's going to approve it. Once she approves it, then you guys will be notified that you have trips to assign. You get an email. Now, those emails, you may, you guys are pretty busy. You may get a lot of those emails. If you want to, you can just use those emails as kind of a heads up to know that you need to go into the travel tracker and make some assignments. Okay. You don't have to wait on them. You can always see this information when you log in. So hopefully you guys will kind of be daily users. You'll come in, this will be sort of part of your process. And the emails will just be just a heads up that there may be something out there, but you definitely don't have to wait on the email. You can go in anytime into the system and see your trips. Now, when you log in, now you do have a lot of tabs, but you're not going to be using all of these tabs on a regular basis. Okay. Really, there's going to be maybe 3 tabs. Really, there's only one tab that you really do your work from. Okay. So when you get that notification that you have trips to approve, you'll come to your travel tracker and you're going to click on the tab that says vehicle owners. And so the vehicle owners tab is your, what I call, working tab. This is where you're going to find everything you need in finding those trips. And really, just about everything you have to do in the travel tracker is in this tab. So you don't have to look for anything. You don't have to click around. Everything pretty much that you're going to do is from this vehicle owners tab. Now, when you click on it, notice over here on the left are different options, and the option that it defaults to is pending vehicles. So these are trip requests. They are approved and they are pending the vehicle and or the driver assignment. Now the information, if you look kind of to the right here, you can see that it defaults to trips from this day forward. So you're just going to see trips that are coming up. Now you do have a toggle for past trips. Hopefully nothing would ever be there, because that would mean that you didn't assign a trip and it's gone by. But you can see past trips that need assignments. Like I said, hopefully that doesn't ever happen. It also defaults by sorting the trips in pickup date order. So what that means is that the trip at the top of the list is the next trip going out. Okay, so you could just work from the top down and cover all of the trips that are coming up. You can sort them in different orders, though, if you want to. Like you could sort them by trip number, that would just put them numerically. By location, that's going to group them according to the school that requested the trip, by submitter, by the vehicle type. Okay, but probably the most useful sort is going to be by pickup date. Now you can see your trips listed here. These are kind of a summary view. So let's just look at what you can see in the summary. The first column is where you can see the school that's traveling. Now all of this says test location. Who submitted it? You'll see an email address of who submitted the trip, when they submitted the trip, and then if there was a teacher's name provided, you would see that information. Notice there's also a little flag here that tells you that something special about this trip. This is a split trip, and we'll talk more about that when we get ready to make this assignment. The next column has the trip number. You can see that it's approved. There's a passenger count also here. The next column is the trip date and leave and return date and time. Okay, as well as the approximate number of hours this trip is scheduled to take. The next column shows you a lot of stuff. The next column shows you the type of trip. It might be an athletic trip. If it's athletic, you'll see the team that's traveling. It could be a staff trip, like this second example, and the type of staff travel that it is. It could be a field trip. Now, you also see, in addition to that information, you see the destination, where they're going. So that would be the next line, where they're traveling to. Whether or not the trip is indicated to be an overnight or out-of-state trip. So you can see that. And if it is overnight or out-of-state, it's kind of highlighted to draw your eye to it. And then finally, the second to the last column shows how many vehicles they've requested and what type of vehicle they've requested. Okay, so you can see that information as well. It also shows you whether or not they've asked for a wheelchair lift with just a yes or a no. Okay, so that's kind of your summary information. So as you may be just kind of preparing for this work session, you can kind of look through and see what's in front of you. Okay. Now, in order to make your assignment, it's very easy. You're just going to click anywhere on this trip information to open up the request form. Okay. Now, we're just going to open up this request here. It's pretty straightforward. It's a field trip, and they've asked for 2 buses. They do indicate that they need a lift. Actually, you know what, I'm just going to do this one because there's nothing special about it. No lift, 1 bus, pretty straightforward. So again, you can click anywhere on the trip information to open it up. So I'm just going to click and it will open up the request form. Now, the request form, there's 3 different types of request forms. There's a field trip request, there's an athletic trip request, and there's a staff trip request. They're all similar in a lot of ways, but there's a little bit of differences in them as well. So you'll get to know these forms as you work in the system. So let's just kind of scroll through and talk about some of the different information that you're seeing on the request. The top section is showing you that it's what trip number it is and that it's a field trip and it's just a standard trip. The other option could be a non-district trip. The trip leave and return date and time are indicated here, as well as the day of the week. You can see that it's not indicated as being overnight or out of state. The comments here, this is an optional field. It is information. Comments is important for the driver to know. So the requester may have put some information in here that the driver needs to know. Anything that's typed in here will print on the trip ticket for the driver. So you may need to put something in here if you need to, that you want to be sure the driver is aware of for this particular trip. The requesting location, the school that requested the trip, where the trip is going to. Here's your destination. The requesters can indicate if there's stops on the way or stops on the return. So you may see more addresses in here. And then an approximate round trip miles. The requesters will be putting in their PO numbers. The emergency contact information is included here, the teacher information, emergency contact. If it's a field trip, you're going to see the grade level that's traveling, as well as an educational objective for the trip. And then we've got our passenger count broken down by adults and students. There is also an opportunity for the requesters to indicate if they're going to be away during lunch. This will notify your child nutrition folks in the district. Now, the part that you're probably the most interested in is coming up here. This is information about the vehicle and needs. Okay, what do they need? And so one of the indicators here on this particular one is that they've indicated it's a drop-off only trip. And so the trip is going to be able to leave at 9 and be back at 10 because the driver is simply dropping the students off. It's a drop off only. Now, if we scroll back up to the top and look at the trip time, notice that the trip time is 9 to 4, but the driver isn't staying from 9 to 4. The kids are, but not the driver. So the driver's just dropping the kids off, coming back. And then at 4 o'clock, the children are getting home a different way. They're not coming back to school. They're going home, maybe with their parents. So, so as far as your, involvement, you only need to think about this time 9 to 10 to drop the students off. Now, it's possible that the requesters won't do this part. They might leave at 9 to 4. Okay, so you'll just need to be aware. If it's a drop off only, you may need to adjust the time the vehicle is going to get back. And you just use the little clock picker here and change the time. Okay. Now, the next part here, we've got a type of vehicle. They're asking for a bus. They only need one. And they don't indicate that they need a wheelchair lift. They don't need a car seat. There really aren't any other special needs. So if you'll scroll down, there is a section called Reserve Vehicles. This is where you're going to take action. The vehicles are going to be reserved at a particular bus barn, and this is set up according to the school that requests it. Okay, so whichever school requests it is going to determine which bus barn and which you guys are called vehicle owners in the travel tracker world. So, and which owner would get this trip. Okay. Then you see some buttons down here to help you find the vehicles and find the drivers that are available during this particular date and time. Now, you also have a couple of override buttons, and we'll talk about those in just a moment. So you guys are going to start with the Find Available Driver button. So if you click on Find Available Drivers, it's going to open up what we call a dialog box, and this is just where you can pick the driver. Now there is some information here in the box about the trip, just some details that you've already scrolled through, but just to bring it back to your memory here. Oh, this is Friday, 9 to 10. Let's see, we don't have any special needs. I just need one. So just good information here. Okay. Now, when you scroll down, you're going to see a list of all of the drivers in the district. And so things that you'll see: the driver's name, which bus they normally drive, where they are located, the driver type, which bus barn. If they have had any trips this week already, you would see that. How many hours that has added to that driver's time, you would see that. And then if you look all the way over here to the right, you can also see how many trips they've had all time, cumulative, not just this week, as well as how many extra hours that has added to their information. Now, again, this is all the drivers that are at all of the bus barns, and you can assign them. However, you may want to just see your drivers, right, from your bus barn. And so you can do that. Over here, we have a little drop down. It says designation or category. And from this drop down, you can filter for just your drivers. And so this is Gallup. And so I'm just going to click on the Gallup bus barn designation, and then notice my list changes. So I'm only seeing the Gallup drivers. Okay. So I know I need one driver, and I'm seeing my driver. So you can just scroll down and find the driver that you want. Now, if you don't want to scroll, you can just type in the driver's name here, and it'll bring up that driver for you. So however you want to find the driver is fine. Now, I wanted to show you, notice in my bus list here, most of the buses are in black, but there's a few here that are in orange. And what that is doing is telling you that for some reason, this bus does not match the request, the criteria of the request. Well, what is the criteria of the request? They said they needed a bus, and they said they don't need a lift. So if we hover over the little I beside the word bus, it's going to define those colors. So you can see if it's written in black, it's a match, the lift and the vehicle type. If it's orange, you can see it's a lift mismatch. So basically what that is saying is that Mallory's bus has a lift because the request said it doesn't need a lift. Mallory's does not match, so it has a lift. So that's what that basically means. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't assign Mallory and her bus to this trip. It's just a heads up for you to know that maybe you need to change her bus. Don't have to, still take it, but it's just a heads up for you to know. I may need to change this bus. Okay, so let's go ahead and assign Cynthia to this particular trip. To assign the vehicle, the driver and the vehicle, you want to click the little star beside the driver's name. Now on this trip, we only needed one driver, so we only pick one. If you needed 2 drivers, you pick 2 stars. If you need 8 drivers, you pick 8 stars. Okay. You can pick as many as you need all at once. Once you've selected your driver, you're going to click the button here to reserve that driver. There is a little place called log notes here. If you wanted to put in a reason why you made this, if there's something special that needs to be known about at this particular assignment, you can put in log notes. These notes are for transportation eyes only. So don't worry about somebody else seeing it that shouldn't. Now let's reserve the driver. I'm just going to click the button here, and there's a new section that's added into the request. It's called Current Assignments. We can see Bus 2051 and Cynthia are assigned to this trip. Okay, very easy to do. Now with that assignment comes some more buttons, and the two buttons down here on the end are the driver's trip tickets. There's one that says ticket/directions. That's a trip ticket that includes the driving directions. The other one just says ticket. That one is just the ticket, so that's the trip information, but it does not include the driving directions. Now, if you would like to, you can print these trip tickets as you make the assignments. You can print them out one at a time as you make the assignments. If you would like to wait, you can print trip tickets in mass, like a whole day's worth or a whole week's worth, whatever you want to do. If you do need the driving directions, you do have to print them one at a time to get the driving directions. You can do it now, or you can wait and do it later. So once we've made this assignment, we're simply just going to scroll down now to the bottom of the form and click the Save Close button. Now, before I do that, though, I'm going to pause just a moment and see if anybody has any questions about that just the basic assignment. No frills, just assigning a driver with that vehicle to a trip. Any questions? Okay, great. So I'm going to go ahead and save and close this one. Now, that was trip 6. Now, remember, when we logged in, we saw 5 trips. Now we only see 4. That's because trip 6 is not in my list anymore, but it's not gone. Okay. It's not in this list because we're looking at trip requests that are pending a vehicle. It's no longer pending. It has one. So it's not in this list anymore because this is only showing my pending list. That's why I call this your working list. So if you work through this list and assign everything out, you've done everything you need to do for assignments. There's nothing pending. But that trip is not gone. You do have an option here called All Trips, and that is literally all trips, whether they're approved or not, whether they're assigned or not, whether they belong, you know, that they are all here. And so there's that trip 6 that we just looked at right here. So you can see it here. It's not gone. But if you look over here at the far right, you do see the assignment. Okay. All right. So let's go back to our pending vehicles, and let's go back and do another trip. Okay, so I'm going to do that one that I looked at first. This one has 2 buses, one is a lift. So I'm going to click anywhere on the trip information here to assign this trip. Again, we would review, make sure we understand what's going on with this trip. We can make changes if we need to. We're coming down to the vehicles needed. And this is a full round trip. They have not indicated that it's a drop off only or pickup only. It's from 9:15 to 2. And they've asked for 2 buses, and then nice and bright highlighted, yes, they need a lift. So let's scroll down to our Find Available button. I'm going to click on my Find Available Drivers button. Again, it's going to show me all of the drivers. If you want to narrow down and only see your drivers, you can do that. Now, when we look at our list here, notice how different it looks. Look at all the orange ones. Why are they all orange? Well, remember, the orange means that it is a lift mismatch. Does not meet the criteria of the trip. So what this is saying then is that I needed a bus with a lift. So the ones that have lifts are black, the little black. Okay. So in your assignment, then you may determine that you don't need 2 lift buses, only one lift bus, one regular bus. So when you're looking here at your request, what your requester has indicated, they only need one wheelchair slot. So you can determine, you know what, I only need to send one lift bus on this trip, one non-lift bus on this trip will be fine. Okay, so in order to do that, we'll click on our find available drivers, and then you can assign both drivers. And so you can know that your lift bus here, maybe Mallory would go on this one. Actually, let me go ahead and filter for just Gallup. So I might put Mallory on it because Mallory's got the lift bus, and then maybe I'll let Santiago do the other trip. So I can assign a lift bus and a non-lift bus to the same trip, all at the same time. And then I would just click my reserve drivers. So now I've got two drivers, two different lift type buses on the same trip. And again, I've got my tickets. If I need to print them with the directions, I can do it now. I can wait and do them later if they don't need directions. Okay. All right, we're going to save and close that one. And let's work through another trip. This next trip we're going to work through, this is a staff trip. They're asking for a Suburban. All right, so let's go ahead and open this one up. We will review. Now the staff.
Sharon?
Yes.
Sharon,
Sure.
this is Corinne. I have a question.
Yeah.
Before you move on to this one. So what if we want to assign a different vehicle that's not listed there?
Great question. And we are definitely going to go over that scenario. Definitely. Yep. Good question. Because that can definitely happen. That's something that we would, you guys may face. So this is a staff trip. It's a little different than the field trip type. So we can see that it's a school visit. We still see date and time. There still might be comments. There's still a destination, PO number, emergency contact, and count. No students though. It's a staff trip, so we just see the number of adults. But notice what we don't see. We don't see grade levels. We don't see educational objective. We don't see child nutrition. So those things are not in the staff trip type. But we do still have the vehicles needed. They've asked for a Suburban. Okay, and this is going to play right into Corinne's question. Thanks for asking that. I'll pay you the money later for making that segue just perfect, for perfect timing. So when we scroll down with the staff trips, they are going to indicate who is driving. So you'll be able to see that information. Now, when we scroll down, we come up to the reserve vehicles. I'm going to click on find available drivers. I might still filter for my bus barn. Now look at the colors we've got now. We've got burgundies and reds, but no black. That's because none of these drivers normally drive the Suburban, right? So if we hover over the little legend, the burgundy says vehicle type mismatch. That means it's not a Suburban. And if it's red, it's a vehicle lift. It's a lift mismatch and a vehicle type mismatch. But anyway, none of these are right? None of these are the right type of vehicle. So for this example, we will only be we only need the driver. We're going to have to change the vehicle. Now let's look at a couple of things before we move on, just to point out. So notice we've got Cynthia here, Santiago, and Mallory. If you look to the right here, do you see trips this week? They've all got little ones there. They have already been assigned to a trip this week, the ones we just did. And you could also see how many extra hours that added to this week for them. Cynthia did that little drop off only, so it just added an extra hour. But Mallory and Santiago have 5 extra hours this week. So it's just information for you as you're making your assignments. Okay. So anyway, this point, we're just going to pick whichever driver, we want to take on this trip, because it really doesn't matter about the vehicle. We're just picking a driver. So let's go ahead and choose Rena here, and we're going to assign her to this particular trip. So when we click on the reserve button, it's going to add Rena and her bus. We don't need a bus. We're looking for a Suburban. So what will happen then is we're going to use this button that says change vehicle. We need to give the right type of vehicle. So when you click on change vehicle, it's going to bring up a selection of vehicles for you that match whatever the request says. I need a Suburban. Okay, I can still see trip information. Now notice that it says no vehicles are available. That's because the none of the vehicles are at the bus barns. All of the vehicles are at transportation. So every single time, if you have to change a vehicle, you're going to use this all locations button here to bring up any of the vehicles that are asked for, and they're all going to be located at transportation. So you can assign any vehicle. So now look what we get. We get our option of Suburbans. Okay, so then we get to pick whichever Suburban we want the driver to take. Click the little star, change it by clicking the change to selected vehicle. And so now we have a Suburban assigned to this particular driver for this particular trip. Okay. Let's go ahead and take this one step further. What if the requester asks for a Suburban, but you know what? They need to take something else. You get to decide that. You can tell the system what to show you. In the drop down here, you can tell the system what you need to see in the list. Okay, so for example, maybe you want to assign, instead of the Suburban, you want them to take an activity bus. So you tell the system what to show you. So then if you go down to your change vehicle, then you're able to see, remember, we got to always click all locations, and there's our activity buses. And then you can pick one of those to assign if you needed to. Okay. So you tell the system what you need to see. The Yukon, change the vehicle, all locations, and we see our Yukons. Okay. So that's how you would change the vehicle, and just by telling the system what you need to see. Okay. So let me close this one. We'll take a look at another request. Let's do this one now. This one asks for a Yukon. I'm actually going to change this one up just a little bit. So let's scroll down, and we're reviewing. This is an example of how it could look if it's got stops on the way, stops on the return. So you're able to see this this information. So they're going from the test school, and they're going to first stop at the elementary school. Maybe they're picking up another group of children, and then they're going to the zoo. All righty, so let's scroll down. This one, they say they need the Yukon, and you're going to look back and you're going to go, no, y'all need more than that. 44 kids, right? So we can't do that. So that's a little extreme example on my part. We're not obviously going to take a Yukon for 44 children. However, what my point is I wanted to point out that you can mix and match the vehicle types. And so let's say, for example, that maybe when they gave this to you, maybe it got by Kim too, because she's also looking for this stuff, but maybe they meant to say they need 2 vehicles, and one of them they need is an SUV, and then they also need maybe a bus. Okay, so you know, if you needed to, you can adjust. You can say, okay, actually they're going to need 2 vehicles, they're going to need a bus, and they also want an SUV. Okay, so when you make that kind of change, you want to go ahead and just save that, just to tell the system, hey, look at this again, refresh that. Okay, so then when we scroll up, now we see we need 2 vehicles. We're going to find our drivers first. We might filter. There is a filter for activity driver and contract drivers. Let's see what we get with the, so there's the activity drivers, and they've got activity buses. So just FYI, I don't know who or when you might need that, but there is a designation for that. Okay, so we need 2 drivers. One's going to take a bus and one's going to take an SUV. Okay, so we can see here right now, we're back to our bus. Everything is a bus, right? Everything's good. We can see our number of drivers, our number of trips that the drivers have had this week. So let's say, well, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and let Kenneth and Wallace do this trip. So I'm going to assign both drivers because I need to, and reserve them. Okay, so now I've got 2 drivers, 2 buses. I don't need 2 buses. Now I need the SUV, right? Now, if I go to my changed vehicles, let's say I want Wallace to take the SUV. If I click on change vehicles and do all locations, what am I going to see? Buses, right? No, that's not what I want. I don't need my buses. I'm going to tell the system what I need to see now. They needed an SUV. So I'm going to tell the system, show me my Suburban, show me my Yukon, whatever it is that you're wanting to give them. So you tell the system what to see. And then when you click on your change vehicle for Wallace, it brings up our Suburbans. Okay. So then we can assign that. So you have control over what you assign, and you have control over what you see to assign. You just tell the system what you need to see. Okay. So there we've got, so we've assigned 2 different types of vehicles to 1 trip using the vehicle type drop down. Okay. Any questions on that part? Got a little more complicated there. Okay. This last trip that we have, if you look over here, it says it's a split trip, and it is overnight, and they need 2 buses. Okay, so let's click anywhere to open the request. Now, a split trip is a trip on which the driver will not stay. So in this example, this is an overnighter. It's going from Friday to Saturday. The driver is going to take the kids on Friday and then pick them up later on Saturday, not spending the night. Another example of a split trip might be just a really long day, and the driver is going to take the kids in the morning, come back, maybe run afternoon routes, and then after supper go back and get them, not staying. Split trip. Another example of a split trip might be where one driver is taking the kids and a different driver is bringing them back, or a different bus or a different vehicle. Okay, so that's a split trip. The driver is not staying. Now, the requesters cannot split the trip. And I don't know for sure, but I think probably if it needs to be split, Kim will split it before she approves it. She can do that. However, you guys can split them as well. You do have that authority, but I think it'll probably already be done. I don't know, Kim, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But for the most part, I think it will be already split. And so if it is a split trip, you'll see that information. You've got the indicator here that it is a split trip. We've got our drop-off leg and our return leg, and then we've got our dates and times. So the drop-off leg is going to happen on September 2nd from 4:15 to 7:30, and our return leg is on September the 3rd from 4 to 8. Okay, and then you can see how long each leg is, a 3-hour and 15-minute leg and a 4-hour leg for the return, making a total of 7 hours and 15 minutes for the legs. Okay, again, this should already be done when you get it. The vehicle count, we need 2. We're going to scroll down now. Now, what we're used to seeing in the Find Available Drivers looks a little different. This one, each of the legs has its own Find Available buttons. Now the buttons work exactly the same. For the drop-off leg, we've got Find Available Vehicles, Find Available Drivers. For the return leg, we've got Find Available Vehicles, Find Available Drivers. So for this drop-off leg, we need two drivers. So I'm going to click on my Find Available Driver button. I might go ahead and filter again for my bus barn. I can see, the vehicle types and everything. So I'm going to go ahead and assign 2 drivers to this particular trip. We'll click 2 stars. We'll assign those drivers to the drop-off leg. So now our current assignments, we can see those 2 drivers with the green go arrows. Drop off, go, green go. Okay, so those are the drivers that are taking the students on the 2nd. Now coming back, I'm going to use my return leg find available. I've got my find available drivers. This is on the split trip return leg. It even tells me in my trip information, my little details here is a split trip. I'm coming back on Saturday. Let me go ahead and do my bus barn. Now I can assign the same drivers if they're available, or I can assign different drivers. Completely up to you what happens with this one. So maybe only Marilena is going to go back. We're going to get Rena to do that trip with her. Cynthia's not available, maybe can't do it. So we'll go ahead and reserve that driver. Now our return leg, blue arrows come back. Okay. And their buses. Now, again, if you needed to make changes to the buses, you can do the same thing. You can use your change vehicle button and put a different vehicle on the different drivers. While we're here, I wanted to show you a couple of other buttons that are available to you. They're the override button here. The override is used if when you go to your find available or your change buttons and you don't see that vehicle or that driver in the list as being available, because the list is only going to show you available vehicles and drivers during that particular date and time. So if a vehicle or a driver is already assigned to another trip, they won't be in the list because the system thinks they are unavailable. So it's going to protect you and keep you from double booking a vehicle or a driver. However, if you know that that vehicle or that driver is going to be available during that date and time, even though the system doesn't think so, the system thinks they're already being, on another trip during that date and time, you can use the override button. The override will technically allow you to double book. And so if you click on the override button for the driver, it's going to bring up a list of all the drivers. Notice it says here, it does not check for availability. So it's going to bring up and list all of the drivers in the driver list, every driver, whether they're available or not. And it will allow you to select them and to assign them to a trip. When you do use this, it's going to give you the option to change the driver or change the driver with their vehicle. So you can make that if you want to bring the driver and their vehicle along with them. If you do use the override, it's going to record that information in the history of the trip. If we scroll all the way down to the bottom, you can see all of the things that have happened in this particular trip. And so if you use the override, it would show that in the history that you use the override to assign that vehicle or that driver. And essentially, it's just there to kind of protect the integrity of the system, so that if the day of the trip comes and the vehicle doesn't show up or the driver doesn't show up and you go back and say why, it'll say, oh, I used the override. Yikes. I guess I didn't check. So be careful. Just use caution if you do use the override, because it will allow you to double book. Okay. Now the driver declined button here, that one will be used if you assign a driver and they decline it, and you want to kind of, in a sense, ding them for not accepting the trip. So if it needs to kind of count against them, and I think, help me remember, Kim, if I'm remembering incorrect, that you do keep up with this like 3 times, and then they, that they're given to decline a trip. Am I remembering that right? Somebody help me out there. Is that right? Is that a district rule, or am I remembering another district?
Yeah, I think it is.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah. So that's what you would do then. I'm not going to click it because I don't really want to ding anybody, but if a driver declined a trip, you could click on the driver declined, and that would, like I said, ding them. It would keep that trip against them. It keep those hours against them. And it would also be recorded. It would also be recorded in the driver log. Okay. Okay. All righty. And okay, let me go ahead and save and close this one. Somebody needs to mute again, please. this is popping up. It's just saying that the trip is more than 500 miles round trip. Just an FYI, just to bring it to your attention. You just say, okay. All right. So now if the, if you notice here that, that nothing else is listed. And so for you guys, that's yay. Okay, I'm done, right? Well, there's nothing else approved that hasn't been assigned. So you've done all you can do. But they're not all gone. All right. This just not in this list because this is pending. So if we look over again at our left-hand margin with our options, we already showed you all trips in that list. Like I said, literally all trips. You can see whether they're approved or not, whether they're assigned or not. Once they are assigned, you can see the information here. You can see all of the assignments that were made. That's just all trips. They're just a list of trips. They are listed by pickup date. You can see past trips if you wanted to. So they're all here. This is not a very useful list, though, other than just seeing them all. Sorting them. There's not a whole lot that you can really find in here if you don't want to just continue to scroll. Now you can access the trips from here. You can still click anywhere on the trip information and open it. But other than just seeing them there, that's what you have. Now I do want to show you a nice little option that you do have, though, to find trips specifically. If you know the trip number, you have an option here, trips by trip number. So you can click on that and then just key in the trip number that you're looking for. Trip 5, enter. And then it just brings trip 5 right up for you. Okay, so what might happen here then, let's say, is you've done all your work and then a couple of days later you hear from a driver and maybe they can't go. You have to change them, right? So you'll say to the driver, what's the trip number? Now, hopefully the driver will know the trip number. If they don't, we'll talk about other ways you can find the trip, but hopefully they'll know the trip number. You'll go right into your owner's tab by trip number, pull it up, click anywhere on the trip information to open it, scroll down, and then if you do need to ding that driver, click the driver declined and then change the driver and put a new driver on. Okay. Let's take another scenario here, same kind of a thing. Let's say that this was that trip that they were going to need one bus with a wheelchair lift and one without. Well, let's say that you made this assignment and then a few days later before the trip occurs, you hear from the teacher. And for whatever reason, you don't need the wheelchair bus anymore. Everybody can go on the regular bus. So you don't need to change the driver or the vehicle. You need to actually remove one. You only need one and you've assigned 2. So in order to do that, we have our current assignments with 2, but we need to take the wheelchair bus out. So in order to do that, you want to go into your request and we're going to change how many vehicles we need. We only need 1 now. And this is a real important step because we want it to all be in agreement. So we only need 1 bus. If you want to, you can even say we're not needing the wheelchair lift. And then we're going to scroll down and save that change that we made, just so that the system recognizes that we're only needing 1 now. Now, in order to remove an assignment, it's even living like kind of helping me out here, check the number of vehicles. I only need 1, okay? So in order to remove an assignment, we're going to use the little X marks here beside the vehicle and the driver, and that will remove them. I can't remember which one of these. I believe it was Mallory had the wheelchair. So if we wanted to remove that, we would just click the little X and it's going to take away that vehicle. And then we're going to use the little X beside the driver and take away that. So now we need 1 assigned. We have 1 assigned. So we're done. We're finished with that one. We'll save and close it. So we've removed that assignment from that particular trip. Okay. So let's do another scenario. Let's say that a trip needs to be rescheduled. Okay, so your requesters can reschedule and cancel their trips, but if that trip is less than 3 days away, they can't. they'll have to contact transportation. And so if you get into a situation like that, you can reschedule or cancel a trip. It may not even be because the requester needs to do it. Maybe you need to do it for some reason. You've decided that the trip needs to be rescheduled. So it's very easy to do. If you needed to cancel or reschedule a trip, you click, anywhere on the trip information again to open up the request. Scroll all the way down to the bottom, and there are several buttons down here. One of those says reschedule trip. Okay, so if you need to reschedule a trip, you're going to simply click on the reschedule trip button. Current dates and times are here, so you can refer back. If you're only needing to reschedule maybe the time, that's fine. You can do that. If you need to reschedule the date and time, you do both. To reschedule it, you're going to use the little date pickers here. So we'll click on the calendar, and let's say this trip was going to go on the 7th. They've actually moved it to the 8th. And so we clicked on the 8th, and it populated the 8th all the way across there. If this was an overnight trip, you would just have to fix the return and to the next day or whenever they're coming back. The time, you can click on the little clock and you can just scroll and pick the time, or you can just start typing in here when they're coming back. You can start like they're coming, this is actually when are they needing to arrive, and when are they leaving the venue, when are they leaving the museum, whatever it might be. And so you can just kind of start typing in, and it will shorten that list that you have to scroll through. And then when are they going to be able to come back? And so maybe they're going to get back. So that helped you to reschedule this trip. Then when you say, okay, the trip itself is going to be rescheduled. You acknowledge that. Now, since you rescheduled it, and notice it tells me here in my history that I've rescheduled it. Once you reschedule it, the assignment is gone because the system doesn't know that the vehicle and driver that you assigned is available at the new time. So you'll have to go back through that part of rescheduling the trip, but we can scroll up and see that it did reschedule for us to the 8th. Okay. So you would go back to your find available and reschedule that trip. Now, I want to show you another option here. So we've done a lot of our find availables, right? And we've gone in and you guys do have a ton of options to choose from with your drivers and your vehicles and everything. However, if you could not make the assignment for whatever reason, something is preventing you from assigning this trip, you can send it back to Kim. Okay, and the way you do that is there's a button here that says select next location, and essentially that's just kind of like your bat signal to send it back there. And so if you click on that select next location, it's automatically going to send it back to Kim in transportation, and then you just save and close it. So it doesn't belong to you anymore. It's gone back to her. Now, if you were going to do that perhaps and needed to let her know why you're sending it back to her, you can add a comment into the trip. There's all these buttons down here. One of those says comments. So if you needed to make a comment, you can put that in there, whatever it might. I can't even think of a reason. I can't do this one for whatever reason. You can make a comment, save that, and it adds that comment actually down to the bottom here in the history. Another thing you could do is just send an email to Kim if you wanted to. So you could click on this send email. The email is set up to allow you to send an email back to the requester. So you don't even need to know who the requester is. You can just click on this add requester and it would put that in there. However, if you weren't going to send it to the requester, you just wanted to send it to Kim, then you could put in her, her email address and add her to the email. It would put her in there. It's not saying it's not a valid email. I don't know. I can't remember. There we go. We'll do that. So then it would add her in there and then put in, whatever your subject is and your message and send that. So that would be a way to send an email. Why, maybe why are you sending this back to her, what's wrong with the request or whatever it might be. So you can communicate anyway from the request form. And one other thing, we talked about rescheduling the trip. What if you just needed to cancel the trip? The trip's not going to happen. Teacher maybe decided, you know, the weather was bad or whatever it might have been. So at the bottom of the form, there's a cancel button, cancel trip and reservation. So if you click on the cancel button, it's going to ask you why. And, you know, maybe it's bad weather or whatever it might have been. Say yes. And that will cancel this trip. You can see the trip and the reservations have been canceled. So they're not in your list anymore. It's not an active trip. It's a canceled trip. Okay. Now, let me think if there was any other scenarios that we possibly would have to deal with. We've changed drivers, we've declined drivers, we've used the override, we've rescheduled a trip, we've canceled a trip. We've reduced the number of, you know, we've like removed an assignment. I can't think of anything else in kind of scenario wise. I do want to just point out this last trip down here. Notice the little calendar down here. That's just a little visual cue that this has been rescheduled. So if you hover over that, it'll show you when it originally was, or the most recent time that it was, and then you can see what it's been rescheduled to. So it was starting at 11:30 and now it's starting at 9. So that can be also helpful information. Okay, so let me pause here and see if there's any questions, and then I'm going to show you how to print your trip tickets. Any questions what we've done so far?
I have a question.
Okay.
So I wanted to know if a driver does decline a trip, where would it show like all our drivers then where they did decline?
How would you know a driver had declined?
Well, is there a list that we can look at to see?
Well, so if a driver declines, you can you'll be notified about it. For one thing, the system is going to let you know that a driver has declined a trip. Okay. Although actually, let me back off of that. The drivers can't. Your drivers are not set up to be able to decline trips. The only way they can decline it is to let you know. They have to actually email you or call you or whatever to decline it. But you're just talking about overall. Can you see driver declines?
Well, to narrow it down to my point is to see, because first they'll decline the first one, then the second one, then the third one.
Gotcha.
So then that's when they'll take them off the list. How would we know that?
Right.
They
Okay.
declined it 3 times in a row.
Yes, gotcha. So in the where that information is held is in what we call the driver logs, and the driver logs are in your assignments tab here. At the last little option down here, driver logs. So when you click on that, it'll bring up a list of your drivers. They're all collapsed, but if you click on it, it will expand, and then you'll be able to see any information or any activity that happened with this particular driver. So if the driver had declined or if the admin declined them, you would be able to see that in here, and you could see, and I don't have any examples because we don't have anybody declined, but it would show up at the end back here. You also can export this log to an Excel spreadsheet, which makes it a lot more easy to kind of, research it, looking for that declined.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great question. All right, so let's talk about getting trip tickets printed for your drivers. I'm going to show you 2 different ways to do it. I told you that everything you can do, everything you pretty much need to do is in your vehicle owners tab. The trip tickets you can get from the assignment inquiry, and that is the last option down here or second to the last option in your menu down here. The assignment inquiry comes up when you click on it, and there is a date range here. So you can pick what it comes up automatically is trips from this day forward. You can default to just today if you wanted to. You can do past trips if you need to, but to do your trip tickets, you would set this date range and say, show me all of my trips from whatever you want. Do you want to do next week? You want to do the next 3 days? Whatever you want. Apply those filters and bring up all of the trips that are occurring during that particular time frame. Then you have a button here that says print trip tickets for all. So you would click that button. It's going to bring up it's going to bring up a new tab, and it's going to bring up all of the trip tickets for that particular date range. Whatever you picked, you click the print button one time and you get all of those tickets for that particular date range. Okay, so again, that was in your assignment inquiry. You set your dates, apply the filters, print trip tickets for all. You can also print them one at a time from here. Notice here is without directions and with directions. That's talking about driving directions. So if you needed to print them one at a time, you could. The ones that do need driving directions, you have to do one at a time. So you could just click those and download them. So that's one way to get it, and I promised I would keep you in your owner's tab. Now, if you want to venture out of your owner's tab, you can also print them from the calendar. You have a calendar tab over here. There are actually 3 calendars in your system, but the vehicle calendar is the one you would use to print your trip tickets. So you could come to your vehicle calendar, and we've got to do next month. And so here I can see my vehicle assignments in my vehicle calendar. If you wanted to print all of your trip tickets starting with the 6th and going through the 10th, click on the 6th. It actually opens up the assignment inquiry, what we just looked at, for the 6th. But you can stretch out your date range and say, go all the way through the 10th, and then it brings up all 4 of those trips. And again, I would print my trip tickets for all. So that's 2 different ways, I think, that'll be quick for you to get your trip tickets from the calendar, which takes you to the assignment inquiry, and from the vehicle owners tab with the assignment inquiry. Okay. And I know we're running close on our time here. There is no, there's 2 other things I want to show you just very quickly. You have 2 tabs here in the middle, the trip request and the assignments tab. These are kind of global tabs. They have all the trip requests and all the assignments, and they have ways for you to find them very quickly. When you first click on trip request, it is your safety net. This is going to be any trips that are not approved. It's unlikely you would ever see anything there because Kim is going to be monitoring the safety nets for you. But in your trip request, you also have show me all of my trip requests by a certain date, by trip number, by the date they were submitted. So you can come in and quickly find all of your trip requests by certain criteria. What do you know? So if I know I need to see all of my trips that are going out, on November the 6th or on September the 6th, you can pull up and just show me trips from the 6th. So what are you needing to see? And then you can click anywhere on the trip information and open it. Okay. The assignments tab shows you all of the assignments. Again, it defaults to a safety net. Again, unlikely there will ever be anything here because Kim is monitoring the safety nets, but you also have assignments by date. Show me everything that's been assigned to go out on a particular date. You'll see that information. Show me all of my assignments in a certain trip. And this one is great. Show all of my assignments by the drivers. So it would bring up this list of drivers, and you can filter for only one particular driver to bring those up. And if you do have any declines, they will show up here as well. There would be a list of it would just say driver or admin declined is what it would actually say. So you can see that information by the driver. So that might be a good way, Corinne, especially to look for something in a row. So you could just, pull up one particular driver. If you saw 3 declines in a row, that would be, really good information to pull up there. And again, that was assignments by driver. So all of throughout much of the system, there are embedded training videos. I encourage you, we don't have time to go over every little detail, but encourage you to look at those little embedded training videos if you run across them. The calendars have a training video for the vehicle calendar and for the trip calendar. Please take the time to watch those anytime you run across them. Your trip inquiry has a little embedded training video that can be very helpful to just anytime you see those, take a look and learn a little bit more about that particular feature or tips about using that particular page. Okay, we are out of time. However, if there are any questions, anything you guys thought of, any kind of scenarios perhaps that we didn't address. Any questions? It's hard to come up with questions at this moment, I'm sure, but once you get in and start using it, the questions may come up. I want to show you how to get answers. In your upper right corner, there's support and training link. If you click on that, we have agents on the desk that can talk with you live. Down here in the lower right, you can click on that. It'll bring up a window, put in your contact information, your question, and someone will be able to chat with you. You can give them your phone number. They might give you a call. If they're not on the desk, so nights, weekends, holidays, you can create a support ticket anytime. Click on the create a support ticket link, put in your contact information, detailed information about what's going on, what your question is, and submit that. And someone on the desk will reply very quickly. Oh, shoot, I just closed down the whole thing. Open it back up. Sorry about that. And then also from the support and training link, we have embedded or a list of a library of videos and quick reference guides. So in the training video section, you will come up and you will see just tons and tons and tons of videos. There are owner videos. These are going to be the ones that you will find most interesting, most relevant to your work. And so you can find out, how do I cancel or reschedule a trips? Where are my canceled trips? That's an important one I didn't get to show you. Be sure that you take a look at these maybe and view some of those. In addition to videos, we have quick reference guides. If you're more of a paper person, you can pull up quick reference links. Again, there is an owner guide here. Click on the guide. It will come up and bring up step-by-step instructions and screenshots of everything. So how do I print a trip ticket? If you click on it, it takes you right to that part of the document and see the information, print your trip tickets or whatever it might be that you have a question about. And this is also PDF if you wanted to print it. Okay. Okay. Last minute questions, concerns from anybody? Kim or Jeff, is there anything that I have not addressed that you think I should?
I don't think there's anything you haven't addressed, Sharon.
Okay. All right. So first steps then, everybody, be sure that you register, and very soon you will start getting notifications that you need to assign a trip. So you'll do that again, pretty much work from that vehicle owners tab, and everything will be listed there for you. That'll be your working tab. Anything you have to assign will be in that owners tab for you. All righty. Well, I'm going to thank you guys again for your time this afternoon. And please let us know if you have any questions. We want you to love the system. So don't let yourself get too frustrated before you reach out to us and ask any questions. That's why we're here. All righty. Well, thanks so much. Everybody have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.